Hi guys, welcome back to Thailand with Toon and Lee. And today, well, let's start off with my fashion accessories, my Texican hat, and I'm also sporting my much loved Liverpool stroke British t-shirt. Not so long ago, and from time to time we've been asked, oh, could you give a bit of a backstory on how you came to live in Thailand and you know your life before Thailand. So I'll just give you a bit of an insight into that, and the main bit is how I actually left my job to come and live here in the bloody middle of nowhere, living like a tramp, and if it was worth it or not. So we'll go for a bit of a wander. I've got to check my bamboo anyway. I keep forgetting to measure it, don't I? So let's go for a walk. Someone's busy again, aren't you? Don't know where you find the time, missus. All right.
Hello, handsome man.
You know it. Right, I'll see you later.
See you. Take care.
Yeah. Are the dogs coming with me? Take care of me.
Don't anyone let you?
Don't let anyone rape me. Well, we can live in hope, can't we? Right then, let's get out of here. It's like a mini day out for Lee, this is. Alright, so we'll kick off. When I first left school, it's a great start. I dropped out my A-levels. It sounds like I'm a bit of a loser to start with, but there was a reason. I'd managed to secure a place as an apprentice in a print company down in London, and you had to work a month in advance before you got paid, obviously, and it would have meant quite a bit of commuting from where I lived in Peterborough at the time. So I needed a few quid behind me, so I left. At the time I was just working weekends around my school time, and I was working as a glass collector in a nightclub on a Friday and Saturday night, and Saturday daytime I was working, well, sometimes Sunday as well. I was working for Freeman's Catalogue. I was a picker, picking orders for people that were buying crap off the catalogue. I'd been doing my two jobs full time then for a couple of weeks, try and get a few quid behind me, so that by the time I'd come to start my apprenticeship, I'd be able to afford my train fare and all that sort of thing. My mum and dad were always helpful as I was a kid, and they always have been throughout my life, but you had to pay your own way. It was one of the very, very good lessons that they taught me in life. Get out there and work. So I managed to get a few quid behind me, and then about a week before I was supposed to start, I got the phone call. Lee, we've gone bust. Sorry about your apprenticeship, good luck. So I dropped out my A-levels. I could have gone back, but I just started getting a few quid in my pocket. It's quite addictive, isn't it? So I didn't go back to do my A-levels, and I managed to get into the local brickyards. So as a young man just leaving school, going to the brickyards, if any of you worked in a brickyard for any period of time, you'll know it's a man's environment. And you grow up bloody quick. It's a great, you have a great rapport with the guys, but it's pretty cutthroat. It's full on in your face, and for shy retiring types like myself at the time, it's a bit of a baptism of fire. Ooh, check out my bamboo. So I was there almost a year, and guess what? That was closing down. So I managed to get a few quid redundancy, not a great deal, but for a young lad, it was all right. So as I was sort of like working the last few weeks there, I probably had my biggest break ever in my working life, and that was my best mate. He was looking for work at the time, and he'd nipped into the job centre, or careers office I think they call it now, and he came out and he said, Lee, he said, look at this ticket I picked up for you. It sounds like the sort of thing that you were going to do in London, but it's in Peterborough, and that was offering an apprenticeship in a print trade, a print house. So I said, that sounds exactly what I'm after, mate. So submitted an application, got an interview. Of course I steamed it, no problem, and I started work there. So I have my old mate Jonathan, I got a lot to thank him for, and I had 17 good years working in the print trade. Now we did a little bit of printing, but what I mean by print trade, we were a reprographics house. And for those of you that don't know, reprographics is the bit in the process that comes before stuff gets printed. So Back then it was all done by people making artworks, and then you shoot it on a camera in a dark room, work with negatives and use scalpels and brushes, and basically put whole pages together. So every magazine that you used to buy back then, it was all done on the bench. When we say on the bench, just over a light, stood over a light box every single day of the week. That's why I got really bad posture. It flipping cripples you. It's like people in Thailand working the rice farms, but what a great job. So I was doing that for a few years, and then it went digital. So I was right at the cutting edge when the time came for Apple Mac to come up with their computers. And of course then we had things like Quark Express, the famous Photoshop, InDesign, and then the world of PDF. So I was right at it when all this stuff was being invented, and of course print then went digital, and it was fantastic because you could do so many things. I mean, if you're into your Photoshop, it's just bonkers. To become as one with like a software and hardware packages, and to love your job, which I did, and then the creative side of it was just awesome. We used to do some big popular magazines in the UK like Performance Bike, Evo magazine, Match Football magazine, Angling Times. So you got to read all the things that you were interested in free, and then you'd walk around Tesco's and you'd see the front covers of the pages that you'd put together. So it was really, really interesting. But the downside was, of course, everyone then thought they could do page, what we call digital page makeup, and it wasn't the case to start with. Our company lost quite a lot of contracts, and within a couple of months we'd won most of them back because people were just setting up in their bedrooms basically and didn't understand colour. And when I say understand colour, is what you see in a printed magazine is a series of dots, but what you see in a photograph is just what we call a continuous tone. So this at the moment is a continuous tone. If we took a picture of this colour has to be broken down into dots, and that would be the majority of yellow with a little bit of cyan in there. So you got your blue. You got 4 primary colours that were used: cyan, magenta, yellow and black. So you'd understand that. You'd know that it was like 100% yellow and 35% cyan and a splash of magenta or black. But that took years and years to pick up that experience. But as technology and software improved, the requirement for that depth of knowledge became less and less so. So the page prices dropped. I mean, when I first started, we were getting it just to make up one single page, an A4 page for a magazine. Our company would get 90 pounds. By the end, we were getting about 15 quid, and it became quite de-skilled because we were then only getting like the front covers to actually Photoshop and everything, and the designers were actually putting their rubbish pages together. When I say rubbish, just pictures in square boxes and a bit of coloured type floating around the place. So easy, sort of like your bread and butter pages, nothing too arduous. So it was becoming quite boring, and I'd gone from doing nearly every day doing front covers for companies. I was then given the dross, mainly because if you start doing a front cover for a customer and it comes to the end of your shift, you don't hand it over to someone else to finish. I suppose it's a little bit like a 5-year-old being let loose with a box of crayons for half an hour and not finishing his picture, and then handing it over to Picasso, asking him to finish it off. It just doesn't happen. What was happening, and I'm not speaking bad about these guys because they're great guys, the overseers for the shifts would take the front covers, and of course if they didn't get it finished, they then gave themselves the overtime to complete it. So everyone's overtime took a hit apart from the overseers, and everyone's job satisfaction was dulling down, so to speak. And what happened at the time, I then became single, and I'd moved out. I'd moved into a guy's place, sort of house sharing. He'd just come out of the army, retired out of the army. I played rugby with him a few times, so I knew him a fair bit. He was just coming through a divorce, and he'd bought his ex out. I said, look, I'm hardly ever here because I'm an instructor now, freelancing. Do you fancy renting a room in my house? Sort of security for him and cheap living for me. So I snapped his hand off. We became quite good mates. I did a little bit of online work at the time for his missus, who did bid submissions for building hospitals and schools and stuff. After a few months, he started bending me ear, saying, I'm going to set up my own company, and my missus needs quite a lot of online assistance. Do you fancy working for us? So it's a big step. I mean, I had 17 years in the print trade. Well, at the time it was 16 years. I said, look, I said, our industry is going down the pan, mate. I said, there's a very, very good chance that when our MD retires, the shower of crap that's left in charge there, the directors, I said, it's going to fold. I'm going to get a few quid. They're going to offer redundancies. So he said, well, I'll hold on then. So he held on. 6 months passed. MD retired, and sure enough, not too long after that, we're looking for redundancies, guys. And stupidly, I haven't got many regrets in life, stupidly, I stuck my hand up in front of everyone and said, I don't care what the package is, I'll have it. Of course, the jaws dropped and said, oh, well, of course, it'll be done on a point system. Basically, if you score a low score, you're out. And they did the point system, and I scored too high because I was qualified in 3 departments, which no one else was, so they refused my redundancy. The only guy out of 30 who applied for voluntary redundancy, which they say they would prefer, they refused. I appealed, and they didn't give a crap. So and I had a meeting, had the union in there with me. I was basically told, well, if you want to go, just go, but we're not paying you. So I went off sick with stress. I found it very, very stressful, of course. And while I was off with stress, I seemed to pick up a couple of certificates for climbing and confined spaces and instructed and that sort of thing. Pure coincidence, that was. And then, of course, once my sick pay was going on to statutory, I handed my notice in. Then that started, oh, nearly in the water. Gang would have saved me. So then that gave me the opportunity to not initially work as an instructor, because that scared the shit out of me. What had originally been agreed was that if I came to work for a mate I was renting a room from, was that primarily I'd be helping his missus online, because that's where my skill set was, and then just to be helping him with the kit, prepping all the equipment. There's a lot of climbing kit that needs checking and maintaining, and of course breathing apparatus for confined space and rescue courses. So I was never ever going to be an instructor, but I needed the background knowledge to help me maintain the kit. Anyway, what happened within about 6 months was his training company went through the roof, mainly because he became one of the very few training providers in the UK that got MOD a training provider approval for confined space work and working at height and rescue for those 2 disciplines. So the world was his oyster then. He got all these contracts bloody all over the world and said, Lee, you're not helping me missus anymore, you're going to be an instructor. I couldn't do anything like this, stand up in front of anyone and talk, but that was it. My cloth had been cut. I didn't really have a choice. So did my city and guilds, teacher teaching, 7303 I think it was, and then obviously we had to get as an instructor you get approved by the MOD, so you know you're basically not a numpty stood up in front of people talking a load of trollop, and that was it. It was all guns blazing. I still remember the first course I delivered. It was a first aid course out in Gibraltar. Jesus Christ. Toon came out with me, and he was there with his missus as well, so in the evenings and that we had a few drinks and a bite to eat, and it was a good giggle, but there was no getting away from it. I had to stand up and deliver my first course, and to make it even worse, he was going to sit at the back. I was shitting myself. I hardly slept all night the night before, and I still remember to this day laying on Toon's lap in bed, and she was just stroking my hair and singing to me so I could try and get some sleep, and it did work. I think I slept for about an hour, and the first 20 minutes of that course, Jesus, the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done in my life. And what made it better was when the boss got up and walked out. I thought, is that a good thing or a bad thing? But as he went out, he gave me the thumbs up, and I thought, right, let's just go for it. And we didn't look back after that. So 11 years doing that. Went to places like not just Gibraltar, Scotland. I went to the Falklands, Belize, Cyprus. There's a few places I can't tell you about, sneaky peeky sites. But I went to some amazing places and met some amazing people and some very, very high up qualified guys in the forces and the infrastructure organisations. So it was quite mentally challenging. I found it because you had to learn the laws, and then you had to learn the safety rules and procedures for these disciplines. So it was like how the laws are applied on the military side of things, because you can imagine in places like Belize and Cyprus, they can't actually stick to what the HSE, what the Health and Safety Executive in the UK is saying. You just can't do it. So it's sort of like you're trying to teach these guys best practice. But nevertheless, it was very, very good, and I worked my way up to doing audits on safe systems of work on companies. So quite often I teach the managers the safe systems of work and all the documentation that went with it, and then you would go once every 6 months to 12 months. I must put some steps in here. Jesus Christ, look at that mushroom. 2 of them. Bloody hell. I'm sliding all over the place here, but now if I pick them, that'll give me some serious brownie points. But I'm sliding on the... Oh, fucking hell. I'm sliding on my shale. They're beauties. Perfect. I think I'll bring the missus out as a surprise. Bring her for a romantic walk. What happens when you're new to instructing? You start off with doing like a lot of the practical courses. They're basically easier to teach, because a lot of guys don't like being taught, really, me included. If you got your hands on the toys and you're launching yourself off high towers and going in holes with breathing apparatus on, I probably haven't worded that very well, then it's quite good fun and no problem. Whereas when you start teaching guys that are like 50, 60 years old, that have been managers all their lives, and they ask you some very, very tricky questions and very, very in-depth information that you need to pass on, that of course comes with experience. So I really enjoyed both sides, but as you become more experienced, you want to get involved in the nitty-gritty documentation and how to actually apply things. That's what I've always liked. How can you actually apply stuff that someone's been teaching you in the real world? Give you an example. A document might say you can't do that. You can't do that. Well, hang on a minute. We're in the Falklands, and it's got to happen. If we don't do it, it's going to be people's lives put at risk. So we're going to do it. How do we do it best? And that's where you got to think outside the box a little bit more. I know it doesn't look like I think out the box, or perhaps I'm never in the box. I should be in the box a bit more, but I really, really like that. So if I really liked it, why did Lee leave? Of course, I met Toon, and a bit of a whirlwind romance, and managed to get her over to the UK. And it was a big strain on the relationship, because as the company rapidly grew, faster than we could ever have dreamt of, I was away from, let's say, a Sunday late afternoon, and I wasn't returning till midnight on a Friday most of the times, or actually on a Saturday morning. You know, if you've got like a 8-9 hour drive back from Scotland, if you've been doing climber rescue training till late on a Friday afternoon in the middle of winter, and then you got to drive back from somewhere like Stranraer. Nearly killed myself a couple of times, so more often than not I'd stay the night and then come back Saturday. So it was a big strain, and after a while we soon realised that wasn't the way to be living our life. But it was a decent job, although it was very, very demanding. What happened, Toon then started coming away with me. So, you know, respect to my boss, He had no problem with that. Of course, the rooms, the accommodation, you're living out of a suitcase all the time. It was all paid for anyway, as far as the room went, and my food and drink. So all I had to stump up for was to pay for Toon when she came away with me. So she would stay basically and just put her feet up for a while I was out playing at work, and then come back, and then we'd go for a bite to eat, or sometimes we'd have thrown the fishing rods in the van if we were going near the coast, and we'd have a few hours fishing in the evenings. So we did that, and then what happened, Toon's dad became very ill, and I'm not knocking the Thai health service. They were brilliant recently with Toon and her thyroid treatment, but there's no getting away from it. There's a lot of reliance on your family in Thailand if you get sick. How can I best put this? Let's say Toon's dad wasn't receiving the level of input or care or help that he really needed in his time of life. And Toon was incredibly close to her dad. They lived the bones of each other, and it wasn't looking good. So I said to Toon, look, I've still got another few years. The plan was to work to 55 or so, up until, that's where I planned for my early retirement. So I said to Toon, look, our relationship is strong enough to get through this. You shoot back and help take care of your dad. We'll rent a property. We'll set you up with a little somtam business or something like that. I'd always planned to retire at 55, so rather than plan, I need this much money and then I'm giving up, I just thought 55, I'm done. I want to get out there and work while I've still got some youth and health on my side. So I just said, look, I'm pretty much not flexi time, but you work with time in lieu. So the hours that I did, it meant that I was like working for 3 months, and then I could have like 3 weeks holiday. That's basically the hours I was doing. So we went for that. We came out here. I spent quite a bit of time with Toon. We got everything set up. She was close to her dad, so she could help him out and take him to the clinic and the hospital several times a week, and it was working quite well. And then the worst happened, and it wasn't anything to do with his sickness. He had a burst appendix, poor sod, and he didn't pull through. They operated on him, but it was too late. So again, big credit to my old boss. Him and his missus just said, just get a flight and get out there and be with your missus for the funeral. So within like 36 hours, I was on a plane, and Toon's big brother, he came to meet me at the airport, and we drove straight back here, and yeah, just in time for the funeral the next day. And yeah, it was a very, very hard time for Toon. She was like a little lost sheep, as I'm sure most people are when they lose their parents. But it was a hard time. I loved the guy. He couldn't speak much English, and my Thai was even worse, if that's possible back then. But we got on well, and he had a lovely, gentle nature about him. Toon's somtam shop was doing all right, but then they refused to renew the lease on the little unit in town. So we then rented a little house in the village just up the road from where we built our house. We weren't going to build a house, but we got binned out of there after 6 months. It wasn't that we weren't paying, and it wasn't that we were trashing the place. It was just our bad luck, I suppose. Just as we were about to leave there, a little plot of land came up near. It was a crazy price, the usual story. Someone wanted to sell very, very quickly. So we said okay, at a very, very attractive price then. And they said yes. So we knocked a house together, or Toon organised getting a house knocked together. And when I say knocked together, yeah, could have been done better. I mean, you think this house is bad, Jesus. But it's all right. It's all right. We then got a guy in to fix everything that hadn't been done correct, but it was done as cheap as chips, and it did its job. So we had a few years living there. But gradually it was taking its toll mentally and physically with me. Just the travelling to and from all the time, and living out of a suitcase, eating crappy food, your health plummets quite quickly, unless you're very, very disciplined. I mean, I use it as an excuse, but there's lots of people who do that sort of job and they're fine. You know, it doesn't bother them being away from their missus. I think some of them quite like the break, but not for me. And I wasn't disciplined enough not to eat at service stations and have a steak nearly every night, and have too many beers. I was drinking every night. So as it was becoming more and more stressy, I wasn't coping well, and we've gradually come round to the point of the story where I actually handed my notice in. And it's a bit of a, I don't know if it's embarrassing, it's a bit funny I suppose, but my Texican, it's not great in the wind. I think I'll have to go round. So we had a job come up in Cyprus, and I'd worked there a fair few times, probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 times. First time I went there was quite stressful. I've been given a map where my accommodation was and where I was working. It's basically a map made by my boss out of crayons. Totally lost getting to my accommodation. I think I got there about midnight the first night, and then I set off 6 o'clock in the morning for an 8 o'clock start from a course. It's the only time I've been late. Tipped up about 8:30. Again, map totally inadequate. So it was quite stressy, but after a few visits, of course you know where to go, and it was okay. On my last particular trip there, I had 13 guys to teach, all Cypriot guys. One guy spoke pidgin English, the rest didn't. So what normally happens there is you get an interpreter. No interpreter available other than the boss of the training company out there. So we were working on behalf of her. So she said, no problem, I'll sit in and do the interpreting for you. Brilliant. I said, however, it is a full breathing apparatus rescue course that we're teaching, so there's a lot of technical terminology. No problem. Okie dokie. Now you're probably thinking that if you're doing a full breathing apparatus rescue course that you'd have your own kit, wouldn't you? Everyone has their own kit. Well, that's quite a lot of kit, and for safety reasons we don't put everyone in the kit at the same time. That is a bit of a numpty. So it's basically you pair off. You have one kit between the pair of you, and then you keep on swapping and changing, make sure that you're all right. However, in Cyprus we had 2 kits for 13 people. One kit was totally trashed, unusable, and the other kit was all out of date, so the cylinders were out of date. So I couldn't let them use it. So I said to the boss, what do you want me to do then? Well, just teach them, you know, just teach them the theory and demonstrate it. I was like, well, I'm not putting the stuff on, it's all out of date and it's trashed. They tried to repair the kit, tried to get her the kit, it didn't happen. So it became sort of like a, how can you describe it? A Monty Python practical course done by theory and demonstrations and then translated. Well, the Cypriot guys aren't the most attentive of listeners anyway. Combine that with having to wait for things to be translated and then not actually have a go on the kit. They just lost the will to live within about an hour of a 4-day course. Closely followed by the woman who's doing translating, and she walked out by mid-morning and left me there. So to say that that was a stressful course was crazy. And then of course I had to give them a test, a theory test, a written test and practical test. So at the end of the course, I admit I let off steam. I got absolutely trolleyed. Soon as I got out of that office, I was on it. I was on a mission. I thought I'll just power through till the next day and then jump on a plane and go back. However, when I awoke, it was light, and my flight was leaving in about 20 minutes, and I was an hour and a half drive away from the airport. So that wasn't happening. I rang the airport straight away. I thought, let's get this sorted out straight, and then no one's any of the wiser. No more flights available that day to the UK. Shit. So then the next flight that was available was on the Monday, which was no good to me because I was delivering a management course in Peterborough the Monday morning. So I rang Toon. I was like, it's happened. I said, I just can't do this anymore. I've had enough. I was in bits. I was sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back. So I said to Toon, what about we bring the plans forward and I come to Thailand? We'll have a lot less money, but I really do fear for my mental and physical state if I carry on this job. And Toon just turned around and said, whatever you decide, I'm all right with. It's you, the one that's got to make the decision. But once you've made the decision, Lee, do not regret doing it. She was really saying, make sure you're bloody sure, because if you get it wrong, I don't want to hear you crying about it. So I knocked the email together and I reread it to myself about 1,000 times. Spoke it to Toon over the phone, and she said, well, up to you. So I sent it. I've still got it on my laptop, and it makes some interesting reading, I can tell you. But I basically said, I can't cope anymore. This is what's happened, and here's my notice. But I'll be willing to stick it out for another, I think it was another 3 months, to train up someone else for you. No, I think it was 6 months, because I knew he had some big contracts. So just by doing that, you might think, well, 6 months if you're at breaking point anyway. I tell you what, as soon as I pressed send on that email, my whole world changed. There was no taking it back. And although they did try to talk me around not to leave, it was just a burden that had been lifted from my shoulders that I'd been feeling for many years. So that was great. I knew I could then do my 6 months, get to the end of the tunnel, and then go for it. So they got a new guy start there. I knew him quite well. It was actually their nephew, and he was a very laid-back guy, which helped me, of course. Rubs off on you, doesn't it? I've always been the opinion, if you hang around with negative people or bitter and twisted people, it rubs off on you. So to hang around with someone for 6 months, Monday to Friday most weeks, and he was a laugh as well, it made it a lot better. And those 6 months, I wouldn't say they flew past, but they went past a lot quicker than the previous 10 years did. So that was that. I saw that time out, and I'd got a lot of audit work to carry on with online, so that saw me through a few months. And then I come to Thailand, and the plan was to sell the village house and come to this farm and finally get our dream into action. So up until then we just planted a few trees. We thought, right, let's get the house on the market. Surprise, surprise, no one bloody interested. Well, not properly interested. So the funds wouldn't stretch. I said to Toon, let's get as far down the line as we can. We'll build what we can, and then we'll have an idea how much more we need. Or by the time the money's run out, we've probably sold the house. Well, as you all know, the house is still not sold, and the money did run out. So I said to Toon, look, there's not really enough online work for it to pay to finish our house off and set up the farm. What about I give my old boss a tinkle and see if he fancies me doing a bit of freelance work for him? Up to you. I did it. I said, bloody hell, Lee, perfect timing. I was just about to advertise for someone. Can you come back next week? So that was the start of my new working hours, which was basically 3 months in Thailand, 3 weeks in UK. It would have made more sense to sort of do it the other way round, but no, I couldn't do that. We'd spent too long away from each other, and once we'd had a year together, in each other's pockets again. There was no going back to what we were doing before. So that was it. We did that for quite a while. Again, it was health issues and that, but the time came where I could foresee how many more trips I needed to complete the house. I was up front with the boss and said, look, say another 5, another 4, another 3 trips, another 2. There was more work there if I wanted it, and I don't know, there's probably work there now if I asked him. He's doing very, very well for himself. What I found is you just come to a point in life where you just say, that chapter of my life is now over. It's so easy to fall into the, I don't know if it's a trap or not, but into this mindset, and I was guilty of it as well, where you just think, I need another 10 grand, I need another 20 grand. Well, if I do another year, I get a few more quid, and then I can buy this and buy that. And I don't know what happened. It was once I'd come here, I just thought, looking at it the wrong way, Lee. Just, I can come here now and I can live here, just not as posh as I thought we could do before. So that's the way I got my head round it. Cut your cloth. I mean, we'd bought a car, and you know, we're paying that every month, and you just think, well, do we need a car? It's handy, but if you don't have to pay that every month, that was by far our biggest expense. Once that went, we paid a few thousand baht to get our chariot made up, our little Ben-Hur chariot on the side of the motorbike. And yeah, everyone laughs at us when they see a Falang sitting on a sidecar driving around when everyone else is in the big Toyota Fortuners or whatever. But that's me and Toon, we don't care. That's how I did it, guys. I wouldn't say I worked as long as I could. I probably did physically and mentally, but we got to a point where we thought, right, we can actually afford to do this now. We can make it happen. We've got a little bit of a buffer, and if we do manage to sell the house by some miraculous chain of events, then we're more than fine. Just a bit of an update on the house. A couple of weeks ago, Toon actually kicked out our last set of tenants, so they're bailao now. They've slung the rook. But again, a trail of devastation. But what we're doing now is we're cleaning it up. We're removing the old poultry shed out the back and clean the garden up as well. And we're going to sparsely furnish it and rent it out to you good people that fancy coming down and spending a few days with us on the farm. So if you fancy some Toon's cooking and a few cold ones, you're more than welcome. And as the house and the garden is all sorted out, we'll pop a video here on YouTube along with booking arrangements and prices and that sort of thing, and then we'll see what happens. Just to let you know, bit of a heads up, if you're a patron or thinking about joining us on Patreon, you qualify for a discount on accommodation. You see, all those years ago people doubted me. Patron, I did say Patreon can pay for itself. Well, not pay for itself, but people who join Patreon can actually save themselves some money. So you'll be looking at a bit of a discount, guys, if you've joined us on that and you come to stay. There you go. Is that far enough, gang, is it? Betty Swallocks, isn't it? Well, you're a girl, you ain't got them, but sweaty nipples, isn't it? Almost at the end of the land. When you come to stay on the farm, your first job was trimming this lot with me. So I need to get another Honda, and yeah, we'll have 48 hours in here trimming this. All right, guys, take care, and we'll see you soon. Ta-ra for now. Gang, come on. Come on, girl.